Here at Liberty and Finance, we're licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. We are standing by the inventory, ready to make sure you get what you need, even into the wee hours of night and on weekends, because preparedness doesn't stop. Call us 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're delighted to have an actual farming couple who does this on the side in addition to 2 full-time jobs. We're talking to Shane and Sarah Lohre of Lohre Farms, and they're going to talk to us about their gradual or sometimes not so gradual path from city dwellers into just booming farmers who are not only producing food for their own family, but for others as well. And welcome back to Liberty and Finance. I'm your host, Dunnigan Kaiser.
And I'm Melody Kaiser.
And we are here today with Shane Lohre and Sarah Lohre, who have the further distinction, if you want to call it that, of being our niece and nephew. And grateful to have you guys here. Shane and Sarah, thanks for joining us on Liberty and Finance.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. We're so happy to have you. I was so excited about this subject. This is one of the subjects that really gets me excited, is farming. And I just want to know, how did you guys get started in all of this? Because it seems you guys are a young couple, and we'll show pictures later of that. But just wondering how you guys got motivated to do this.
I think for the origin story is quite lengthy on this, but I'll try to make that as short as possible. We realized at our last house that we weren't enjoying having neighbors as close as they were, so we were looking for a little bit more space. We entertained the idea of a garden at our old house.
We had a small one.
It was pretty small.
It was
it
very
was
small.
about maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. And when we moved and had more land and space, we knew that we wanted a garden as well. And I think the first year the initial plan was maybe 30 feet by 30 feet.
I think that was the initial plan, but our garden kind of got bigger than that because I am one of those people that will plan a garden, but I kind of go overboard. So I end up with way more than I kind of planned. I go to the store with like a list and I'm like, I'm going to get this, this, and this. And then by the time I come home, I realize I did about double that, maybe triple.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I think the idea grew much faster than the actual process. And it eventually we had to think outside the box and get a little bit of equipment to help us.
I was going to say, so you acquired a tractor, and how did you learn the skills to go, okay, I'm just going to, because I've seen you needing to repair the tractor, and how did you learn some of those skills? And you have the other thing, I know it's a little bit off topic, but you made a beautiful stand so that people can buy from your stand as well. But so what made you go, well, we need a tractor, and then I'm going to learn how to fix on it. I'm going to learn how to ride it.
The tractor came about due to the fact that we were having, the first year we ended up having a really massive garden here, and we found out that we had spent most of our day dealing with weeds. And so I kind of looked into some old time farming techniques and how they dealt with weeds, and quickly realized that we needed a little bit more equipment than a garden hoe that you ran manually in your hands. So I started doing a bunch of research, basically YouTube, found out that the particular tractor that we have is one of the most common ones ever created. There's a lot of literature online, lots of videos teaching you how to operate as well as do minor repairs, and the parts are readily available, being that it was so popular. So it basically just blossomed from there, and then with each bit of learning came the different types of implements that do different things, and and then searching online and trying to acquire them. There's a lot of farm equipment that's laying in fields, and if you can just find out where it's at, most of it's relatively cheap and might need a few minor repairs. Yeah.
And I would say, as far as like the learning and being able to repair things, honestly, a lot of it was trial and error. Like, he just kind of was like, you know what? I've seen someone weld this. I'm going to try to do it. So I'm going to invest a small amount of money in a cheap little welder, and I'm just going to try to make it work. And a lot of times it works great. And there were some times where it didn't necessarily go as planned, and he learned a lesson, which that lesson helped later on because then he knew to go about it a different way. So truly it was just trying and failing, and then sometimes not failing. And when it didn't fail, it was great.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay. You said you kind of gradually got started, but then you started adding animals as well. What kind of animals do you have, and how do you use the animals?
So we started with chickens because I always kind of wanted chickens. And when we moved here, I was like, let's start with like 4 or 5 chickens. But Shane ordered 16.
Yeah, I think that the place that we bought them from had a minimum requirement for shipping, and I think what it comes down to is that they need to ship so many of them together in order to get them to survive the trip. So yeah, I think the very first week we lived here, we had 15 chickens show up.
Yeah, so it was like a week after we closed down the house, so that was just a little bit stressful because we were new to chickens and we had them coming a week after being here. So we kind of had to figure out how to take care of them real quickly and where we were going to put them until we had a permanent place to put them in. So we started with chickens, and their purpose mainly was eggs and later on to help fertilize naturally because we don't like using pesticides or anything that isn't natural. So that was the main purpose of the chickens. And then after we got the chickens going, then it was kind of like, maybe we should try ducks. They don't seem that far off. So then we got a couple of ducks. And again, we were going to start with 2 or 3, but there was a minimum shipping thing. So I think we ended up with 10 ducks, I want to say. And that one was a little bit trickier because ducks are a little bit harder in the very beginning, I feel like, than chickens. They're a lot messier, and we weren't really prepared for them. So we did unfortunately have quite a few not make it with the ducks. But then we tried again with the ducks, and as soon as you know what you're doing, then it becomes a lot easier. It's mostly temperatures and having them a safe place. We had originally with the ducks planned on just kind of letting them live outside because, you see ducks live outside normally, so we didn't really build them a shelter.
Yeah, and that didn't work at all.
No, they got picked off pretty quick.
We fed the local wildlife quite well, I think, for about a 2-week period with that.
Yeah.
When you get predation like that, when you suffer predation, do you ever know which species are doing the predation, or do you have to guess?
Yeah, sort of. So with the original ducks that we had lost, we were trying to also learn from them. So they were living on the property. They didn't really have, even though you build a structure for them, that doesn't necessarily mean that's where they want to be. So what we were finding out is that they wanted to be down by the pond along the shoreline. And we kind of allowed that to happen. But the issue is that tonight we have 7 ducks, and then by tomorrow morning we have 6 ducks and a pile of feathers. And so I think what we were dealing with was night predators. So I'm assuming it was probably an owl or of sorts, something like that was picking them off.
Owl or eagle. It
was basically one every single night until unfortunately they were gone. That was a extremely devastating learning experience, but also, it's rather embarrassing to have something like that take place because you feel like you should be doing so much more for them. From there, we kind of looked at our situation that we had built for the chickens and kind of thought, how can we adapt this for the ducks so that they can live together and also all be safe? So when you go out into the chicken coop, you wouldn't necessarily notice that there's 2 levels that are built for the animals. But when you watch them come in at night, it's quickly understandable that, the chickens perch up high or roost up high, and all of the ducks find shelter on the ground. So we've kind of adapted it from a standpoint of the chickens stay up high and their nesting boxes are up high. The ducks stay down low on the floor and their nesting area is down on the floor directly below the chickens' nesting area.
And the other thing was training the animals to come in at night. So then you don't have to leave them down there like we did with the first ducks, because we didn't train the first ducks to come back. So now we train them.
How do you train ducks?
So it's actually a lot easier than you would believe. And it started with us training the chickens. So early on, I had bought a novelty decorative bell that I mounted to the side of the chicken coop. And anytime I would go out, usually once a day, I would take a bag of mealworms, which they absolutely love to eat mealworms. And as it sprinkled them on the ground and they're sitting there eating them all, I would just constantly ring this bell. Well, from there, anytime that they were out wandering the property, I could walk down to the barn and ring the bell, and all of the chickens would immediately come to me thinking they were going to get a treat. And more of the purpose for this was because the chickens are free ranging all over the property, we wanted to have a situation where we could recall them back to the chicken coop if we needed to, say, leave for the evening or had a situation where we just needed to get them inside. It's quite effective.
Or if you spotted an eagle overhead.
I will tell you one thing that we have constantly done since the beginning of having chickens is we have always maintained at least one rooster. And just observing them throughout the day, it is incredible how attuned they are to the environment surrounding them and how much of an early warning system they are for the other animals. They will notice anything that's approaching and they will quickly notify the hens that something's going on. And it's probably the only time you'll really see the chickens move as a flock together, is when they want to try and take cover or get away, or they'll even send out an early warning. If I walk down towards them, they will start moving in a direction, or just moving away from anything that could be a perceived threat. Training the ducks is very similar in that manner.
Except we use peas instead of mealworms. They like peas a lot better.
Peas.
And they're very cheap.
Yep, very cheap entertainment. Also good entertainment. One thing I will say, though, that is massively different between the two is as nightfall comes, basically about sundown, the chickens will put themselves to bed, whereas the ducks have a tendency where they want to stay out right until that last minute of sunlight is available for them before they'll put themselves in.
So after the initial training of the bell and stuff, as soon as they know where they go at night, then you don't really have to do much. And when the sun comes down, they just waddle their way up and put themselves in, and you just go out and shut the door. You can buy an automatic door, which at some point I would like to do, but that would go, you can set a timer on it, or it can go by sunlight, and they'll already have themselves put away, and then it'll shut for them. So those are nice too, which that's, a goal for the future.
Long as we're on this topic of ritual duties that can't not be done. I mean, you can't just leave the coop open and think that they're not going to get, predated on by a different species or whatever. What about people who are anticipating any kind of gardening or farming or that sort of thing, thinking, gee, we can't do any of that because we can never travel, we can never go anywhere, we can never stay out late at a wedding dance or anything like that. How have you guys managed to do this while having a life?
We don't. No, just kidding.
partly true. I think a lot of the things for us is, I don't know how to word this. Sarah and I have built kind of a schedule for the both of us where we kind of can split things up, being that she's here to let the animals out in the morning. And then as summer gets going and further along, I come into the picture later on in the day to kind of deal with the afternoon type chores. As far as, locking the animals up so that you can go out to a dance or this or that or the other, I probably would be looking more towards an automatic door type situation. I think that we've been a little hesitant for that only because Sometimes the ducks are lazy and they will wait, and like I said, until the last moment. And I would hate to have one or two locked out. You're also going to get chickens that will try to keep themselves out. We had a situation last summer where we didn't realize we had a chicken every single day go lay an egg in the woods near a tree, and then she wanted to sit out there all night on them incubating.
She had gotten Brody.
And so, and we just didn't, there was just too much action going on the property. And, if they get in the woods, they're pretty hard to see. But, as far as traveling or needing to leave, I think there's other options for people. We have a chicken run that surrounds the immediate outside of the chicken coop that we can kind of keep them in. So if you knew you were going to be doing something like that, that is also a predator prevention. So that would allow the chickens to be able to come out of the chicken coop, have their sunlight, scratch around it and get some grit, but then also put themselves to bed and kind of have that extra barrier between them and any would-be predators that could get to them, and until you could finally get home and then, shut the final door for the night.
We've had friends who raised chicken and ducks, and they had serious trouble with raccoons basically beheading their chickens. And even though they had a wire fenced yard around the coop, the raccoons were clever enough to get the chickens to come over close enough to the chain link fence thing or whatever it was, chicken wire, that they could actually, the raccoons could reach through and pull the heads through the fence. So they were thinking they had to go to a double fence or something. Do you guys have any trouble with mammals that are being so sly like that?
The biggest issue that we had was a year ago with mink. And this is kind of a fortunate, unfortunate type scenario. The fortunate part was we had proof of what was happening. The unfortunate part was I sat through lots of video of watching animals die in order to get that proof. We had security cameras installed out to watch the animals in the chicken coop. So I was able to see what time the predation was taking place, how they were getting in, and then which eventually led to how could we prevent this. The biggest issue we were having was they were digging under the barn and coming up from underneath. So what Sarah and I did, the second that the frost left the ground last spring, we dug a trench all the way around the barn down a couple of feet, and we put a couple of layers of chicken fencing down into the ground so that if they try to dig, they're going to run into that. And then as a secondary precaution, inside of the chicken coop or inside of the barn, we have a dirt floor, and we like to keep it that way because that's how we make a lot of our garden compost. Unfortunately, by not having a permanent floor like concrete or something like that, you run the risk of animals coming through. So we had laid down a layer of chicken wire on the floor, and then we put basically a palleted floor over the top of that. We haven't had any issues since, and I would like to believe that it's going to be virtually impossible for, at least at this point, any mink to tunnel underneath and have access to any of the birds. So,
and as far as raccoons, we had a problem with them, I think, one time. But then after we put up that fencing, we really didn't have a problem with them. Chickens generally will fly or roost up high to get away from them. So I guess as long as you give them space to get away, you're probably okay. It surprises me that the raccoon your friend dealt with got the chickens to kind of come over and behead them.
Yeah, they were holding out mealworms for him,
The
crafty buggers.
The mink problem was basically a mink duck problem because the ducks sleep down low, like I said, whereas
it didn't get our chickens.
Even during the attacks, the chickens were all up high and didn't suffer anything. Now that could simply be because the mink chose the easy target on the ground. Whereas if the ducks, say we didn't have ducks at all and the mink would have come in, I'm assuming that the attacks still would have taken place based on the videos that I said I sat through. It was quite amazing how much that mink could rapidly climb the walls in the coop, and it was kind of like a bolt of lightning flying around the inside of the coop.
So they're fast. Wow.
Oh, extremely fast.
Now, do you just have the ducks as pets, or do you eat their eggs as well?
We do eat their eggs as well, and we do also eat the ducks. So most of our ducks are dual purpose. We have one duck that we'll probably never eat, and that's Lucky, because he was the one who survived, the sole duck that survived that mink attack that Shane talked about. He played dead.
Yeah, he actually survived, I think, he survived 3 mink attacks.
Yeah, that's correct.
And in each of the instances, the mink had him in a position where I'm very surprised that he survived, but he, on video, basically played dead until the mink left and was able to survive each time. So that's how the name Lucky came about. And he is definitely more of a pet than anything. And yeah, he will probably end up much like our very first rooster we ever had, will probably get himself a permanent spot on the farm when he finally passes on. So.
Is Lucky the one that you trained to use the Glock G17 to protect the nest?
Yeah, exactly. Protector.
Yes. One thing that we realized last summer was our egg production for ducks was almost zero. And Sarah did a bunch of research and found out that we had way too many male ducks, and that could be affecting our production. So we decided early on this winter to harvest, I think, almost all of the male ducks except for maybe 1 or 2.
We have 2 left.
And almost instantly our egg production went crazy. And we went from getting maybe 1 egg every week to getting...
we get a dozen a day now.
We're getting a dozen a day on duck eggs.
I was just going to ask how you know a duck is a male or a female, because I certainly wouldn't know. I mean, I guess they are a little easier because you've got, it's not like your typical mallard though, right? Because those you can tell, but are they colored differently?
Well, that was actually the trick. We had a lot of mallard drakes, and so those were the easy ones we chose to harvest, basically because we knew that definitively they were the males. So,
but not all breeds are so easy to sex. Different breeds are a little bit mallards and call ducks are pretty easy to sex because the males are brightly colored. Pekins are a little bit trickier, and so those ones, they're a little bit harder. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on that. Pekins, I just go by their behavior, to be honest, and that kind of weeds it out. Cayugas are colored a little bit different, so those ones you can tell. So it kind of depends on the breed of the duck. But call ducks, I feel like, are the easier ones to sex. Yeah,
I'm sure there's some people out there that are extreme experts and can just spot them and instantly know which is which. But
right.
We've gone more from a behavioral standpoint as far as identifying which is which and how they kind of interact with one another.
But runners, the coloring matters too, because we have a few fawn runners, and those ones we have 1 male and 2 females, and you can tell by the size and the coloring of the duck. But it's a little bit harder. They're not as easy as chickens, where you can easily tell a rooster from a hen.
As far as the taste goes, is eating duck eggs versus chicken eggs, is there a huge difference, or are they kind of similar tasting?
I would say for me, the biggest thing that I noticed, and maybe this is just my own personal observation, but duck eggs seem to be a little bit more, say, watery than a chicken egg. So it'd be basically like if you took a chicken egg, cracked it in a bowl, and then maybe added a 1/8 of a cup of water to it. That seems to be kind of the consistency that I've noticed.
Truthfully, I think duck eggs taste more eggy. I think they have a stronger flavor than chicken eggs.
But I'm wondering,
but most of that might double the nutrition as chicken eggs, so they're way more beneficial for you from a health and nutrition standpoint. And they're larger, so they're nicer to bake with because you don't need as many as chicken eggs.
Right. I think that the taste might come down to what their food source is. The chickens will tend to eat more bugs on the ground that they're finding and different things like that. And the grains that we supplement their diet with in the wintertime versus the ducks would much more prefer to kind of go eat the foliage and the grass and
more leafy green.
And I'm assuming they take care of the duckweed in your pond or things like that.
Absolutely.
That is something that we are still in the process of figuring out. That was one thing that we had a major problem with in our pond early on when we moved here. But due to some of the changes that have taken place with the pond over the past year or two, also including adding the ducks to the pond, last summer was the first time that I saw very, very little amount of duckweed compared to the pond looking like you could just about walk across the green carpet.
Miles Franklin Precious Metals is one of America's oldest and most trusted bullion dealers. Miles Franklin is A+ rated and accredited by the Better Business Bureau, licensed and bonded, and has 0 complaints ever registered. Here at Liberty and Finance, we are licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. To order, simply call us, discuss your needs, and we can let you know our live inventory, prices, and availability, and lock in your order over the phone. Once your order is locked, the price is held for you regardless of market fluctuations, and the metals are reserved for you awaiting your settled payment. Within 1 business day of ordering, you will receive an email invoice detailing the order and payment instructions. Miles Franklin accepts payments by bank wire, ACH or electronic check, money order, check mailed priority mail, and cryptocurrency. The fastest forms of payment are bank wire and cryptocurrency. Upon settled payment, metals will ship out within 3 to 5 business days. You will receive tracking information via email. Domestic shipping charges are $15 for any order under 500 ounces of silver or 10 ounces of gold. For orders larger than that, domestic shipping is free. The package will be boxed, fully insured, and labeled discreetly, with no indication of the contents inside. For your privacy, the name Miles Franklin will not even be on the package. To talk to myself, Kaiser, my brother Elijah, or my father Dunnigan, call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.